Well. A very good Monday afternoon to you, my friends. Yeah, isn't it nice going into work or starting work, having one at the weekend? It's a very unusual. I think 258 days since we last won at London Stadium, and a victory which I think, well, I think for most last week, I think a lot of us thought it would be a bit of a cricket score, including myself. And I was deeply worried about what a 6'7" bigger effing German than our bigger effing German could do against a very frail defensive side, particularly off the back of the Brentford defeat and the Leeds defeat. But as the famous football saying goes, it's a funny old game. But what we do and what we've done for the last few games, what we're going to continue doing throughout the season, is breaking down the game from a stat perspective. So the breakdown, looking at the key moments, the key stats, and also looking at what we can take away from it and the victory, and what we can work on and maintain going into the Burnley game next week, or this week rather, sorry, this Saturday, before then another international break. But the last international break before March, albeit there will be the AFCONs in the middle. So anyway, let's look at the Finalysis player ratings. Now, obviously, for anyone new to the channel, Finalysis is an app which you can get involved in. You can download it, and it is just for the fans. You have to be vetted to become a West Ham fan so it's genuine fans, and they can all vote on player ratings, and there might be questions, and all that type of stuff is then used on Sky Sports and various other DAZN and various other sort of media outlets. So you can see very much a different contrast, because it's a score out of 100, and you can see here usually we get a lot of yellows and reds, which obviously denote a very poor score. But you can see there the lowest score according to Finalysis was, we won't look at the subs in terms of the starting 11, was 𝗣𝗟𝗑 at 69, who I thought had a very good game, a much better game than usual. But you can see there Freddie Potts getting the plaudits, as you would assume. Not only that, obviously, but he won man of the match and received his award after the game. Callum Wilson, 70, starting up front. I think, although a lot of us were worried about the game, when we saw the team sheet, we thought, do you know what? Okay, there's a chance. There is a chance. When it comes to West Ham, there is always a chance, as we know. And actually, do you remember last year it was Newcastle away under 𝗦𝗨𝗣𝗥, when it just clicked and then just went by the wayside? Nuno's been talking about trying to find the right combinations to click, and I think this clicks. Now, obviously, the slight, he has to tinker a little bit, the old tinker man. What's the centre halves? Flipping them around. And I didn't see anything from a footballing perspective which suggested to me that didn't work. I saw plenty of reasons why it did work, with the ability for someone like Max on his, doing the diags on his left foot, almost curling them into the path of 𝗣𝗟𝗑, and vice versa, Todibo doing the diags and curling them into the path of Wan-Bissaka, which happened a few times. I would hope this is the 11 we see until at least January, bar any injuries, suspensions. It should be settled now, and I think not just that, but the intensity. We were pressing high. Freddie in the middle. When you're up against arguably one of the best midfielders, most field combos in the Premier League in terms of, Bruno, Tonali, and Joelinton, particularly physically as well. But Tonali is one of the best midfielders in the Premier League, in my opinion. They didn't really get much of a sniff. There was one heavy touch from Freddie, I remember, and the fact is I can pick out that heavy touch, which shows that it went against the rest of his performance. And it was in the first half, but then he did tackle Tonali and crunched him afterwards. So that was the only thing I saw where it was a heavy touch. That was it. And the fact is, because I can single that point out, it shows you what a great game he played. And hopefully that will be the start of him being in that rightful position alongside Fernandez, and again 𝗣𝗘𝗦, very strong game from him again. Nino was obviously in the press conference was talking about him being the 10. The 10. It's not just a number, it's a position, it's a mentality. And you felt a lot more of that with 𝗣𝗘𝗦 taking that responsibility and obviously scoring the goal as well. And all in all, a very competent performance. The ability, taking off Wilson and bringing on 𝗬𝗪. Obviously, we're probably about 2 weeks away, 3 weeks away, maybe, of the likes of 𝗏𝗏 and 𝗏𝗏panos being back in the contention. That worked. And against the Burnley side on Sunday, or Saturday rather, I would assume a similar tact. We need to sort of wrap Callum Wilson in cotton wool, I think, until January at least, when potentially reinforcements could be brought in. But for me, clearly the central defence still needs at least one really good defender, I think, and I think the forward line needs one really good forward as well, younger man as well. Kyle Walker-Peters came on, did a decent job, even minutes for Igor, his first minutes for West Ham. So great to see. So decent, and Nuno getting a very high score of 80 out of 100. He got it right. Supanez played the game right, and revolutionary when you play your right players in the right positions. As I've always said, it's one thing less thing for them to worry about. And the fans responded yesterday. They were great to start with, and then they saw what they liked on the pitch and gave it back. And Nanton spoke about it in his post-match press conference. They gave a little bit, and the fans gave it 1,000 times more. So all good. Let's look at the stats. Let's go full screen. So XG 2.1, XA was 1.6, 4 big chances created, and obviously four scored. Touches in the opposition box 28. I think it was about 10 or 12 for the Leeds game, for example. Aerial success 58%. Again, not fantastic. I think we were about 30% against Brentford. I think we're probably about 50-60% for Leeds, so very similar. Shot conversion rate 20%. Defensively, passes per defensive action 9.2. Opponents' shot creating actions 22. Ball recovery 61. That's really important. Tackles in the final third 7, and tackles, and that's what I really liked. There was some tackles. How many times did Freddie Potts win the ball tackling in that midfield rather than being all nicey? Aggression. Matheus Fernandes, great game for him. Aggression in that defense, and in attack as well. It was great to see. In terms of midfield, progressive passes the same as against Leeds, but a lot more fruitful. Ball recoveries in the opposition 14, very strong. Pass accuracy same as against Leeds. Key passes 2.3, interceptions 9.1. Accepted passes turnover was above average. Progressive carries 18. Again, you can see in terms of the attacking movement, the likes of Somerville and Diouf very heavily weighted in terms of down that left-hand side. It's always been that over the last, even with Emerson and 𝗣𝗘𝗦 and Benrahma, that left-hand side has always been more fruitful for us, which is quite surprising when you think Bowen's on the right, who's, half a dozen goals away from beating Mikel Antonio's all-time record for Premier League goals. So it does surprise you, but actually a lot of the stuff he's done through the left-hand side, although it will be balls, might be crosses from Diouf to the right flank, and then Bowen cuts inside and scores. But you can see how that attacking movement is worked on. So what can that tell us? What can that tell us about in terms of the stats? What are we looking at there? Oh, I've got one ahead. Hold on, let's go back. There we go. We talk about the left-hand side, the sort of dominance of the left-hand side. And yes, it's something to bear in mind, but also it is an incredible weapon. I mean, the fact was, you saw the likes of Diouf and, the crosses he brought in. And, I mean, to be fair, although despite the fact 30% was on the right-hand side, Wan-Bissaka cross got the own goal. But, West Ham leaned heavily on the likes of Somerville and Diouf to stretch play and create offloads. And this makes a shift from earlier matches where flank usage was more balanced or even maybe more right heavy, to be honest. So that was really interesting to see. We'll go back to this one. Pressing intensity is improving, but still inconsistent. 14 ball recoveries in the opposition half show a more proactive press than in previous matches. However, the press faded in phases, allowing Newcastle 22 shot creating actions. A reminder that sustained pressure is key, and you could see that in the training videos. They were talking about pressing at the same time. Mark Robson particularly talking about pressing at the same time, and I think that level of intensity will come when the fitness levels come up as well. You can't do that all the time, so it's about picking the right times to do the press and do it consistently. Right, let's make sure I don't go. Let's go to number 3. There we go. Shot conversion and big chance creation are trending up. 21% shot conversion rates, and 4 big chances reflected a better final third execution. Early matches saw lower. So I thought I was going to sneeze, and I did. Saw lower conversion despite similar XG, suggesting finishing drills and decision making are paying off, and what we're doing on the pitch and training pitch is paying off in terms of that decision making process, and in putting the players in the right mindset to make the right decisions at the right time, because that's critical. Defensive structure is more compact, still vulnerable centrally though. In that we had an XCA, so that's not XGA rather, not so that's goals against of 1.9 of 1.3 and 9.1 interceptions per 90 show shape, especially in wide areas, but only 21%. No, sorry, 27% came through the centre. A sign that there's West Ham do seem to be still wary of exposing themselves in transition. That's why they're almost going out wide, because they're slightly worried about, well, I don't know if it's a wide or maybe it's a team tactic to not go centrally, to go out into the flanks, maybe where it's less congested. Particularly, you've got to think from Newcastle side, with the likes of tonali, with the likes of Bruno and Joel Linton, particularly for the first half, sort of compacting that central bit, that central sort of part of the pitch. So they had to go wide as well. So although it might suggest still some wariness in terms of transitioning centrally, I don't think it's as bad as we're making it out. And youth integration is accelerating tactical flexibility, with Potts contributing across metrics, recoveries, interceptions, progressive passes. West Ham's younger players are not just filling gaps, they're reshaping how the team builds and defends, and particularly true with Freddie, and you would assume, and Fernandez. I mean, and Fernandez is young, but still has, obviously a lot more experience than Freddie. But you can see the difference having Freddie Potts. It changed the side completely, which is a good thing. So, not necessarily how can we fix it, but what can we do to improve rather than fix? In all honesty, how can we build upon it? Not necessarily how we can fix it, how we can build upon it. In terms of Paqueta's creativity, leveraging it so it's more consistent. So, obviously, scored a long-range equaliser, created multiple chances, 4 key passes, 85% pass completion. But West Ham really must build around this distribution and give him more freedom between the lines, and having the likes of Potts and Fernandez looking after the midfield, the front sort of 3, say, in terms of Somerville, Wilson, and Bowen, 3 of them allows Paqueta to sit in between that line. So you remember when we played Brentford and Damsgaard? Basically, Damsgaard was in the middle of everything, and in between the lines, between the midfield and the strikers, and was just in that pocket. And that's basically where we need Paqueta most effectively, in terms of that pocket. In terms of fixing midfield transitions and defensive cover, despite the win, obviously, at times Newcastle did expose the midfield pairing, and sometimes bypassing them a bit too easy. Sometimes, introducing a more mobile midfielder or adjusting the shape could further reduce vulnerability in transitions. I mean, we had plenty of times where they did sort of get through a little bit too early, maybe when we were dragging Freddie out. And I think what was interesting was a point that Nuno made in one of his interviews to say, despite Freddie getting in the goal position, he'd prefer him just to sit in front of the back 4. And I think sometimes that could be a case. But look, we're splitting hairs at the moment, but it's worth just bearing that in mind. I think there's definitely. I mean, you did see several times. You had the likes of when Aaron would go forwards, Diouf would cover, and they'd always go into a back three, and vice versa. But sometimes where Diouf was covering as the left centre back of the three, and then he would go to the left, and then Wan-Bissaka would come to the right. They were constantly changing positions based on who was going forward. So there was that mindset in place. You could see that, but maybe even more so to keep that in mind. Capitalising on set piece opportunities. Obviously we scored via a Sven Botman own goal. From a dangerous cross. We had 6 corners as well. I think Qiellman had a really good header in the first half. Yeah. We brought in the likes of Souček. Set pieces seemed a bit. I mean, I know Paqueta sort of got the low drive, but I think we could. There's more routine that we can definitely yield more goals from our set pieces. We have got a side that are very, very can be quite physical, quite tall. The likes of Qiellman, the likes of Todibo, the likes of Souček. These guys we were utilising. It was nice to see Freddie Potts on corners and stuff. That was interesting to see. And I think we could definitely exploit that and yield more goals against teams who particularly struggle in those dead ball set piece scenarios. Basically us. In terms of improving early game intensity and defensive alertness, I think this was very key yesterday. In the previous match against Leeds, we conceded twice in the first 5 minutes. We responded, yesterday we conceded in the first 4.5 minutes. However, and it was almost like we almost shocked ourselves as we hit the post, and we were a little bit stunned, and Newcastle basically ran down the other side and, scored. And it does seem that early part of both halves, we just always seem to struggle. We have done proverbially. But starting games with sharper pressing and being tough to break down at the beginning will prevent these earlier setbacks. It was almost like we were determined to go out of the traps and have a go. We did, and we could have scored, and that would have been interesting to see what would have happened. I think the best thing that happened yesterday was us conceding early on, because the crowd responded, and the players responded, and we couldn't. If we scored early, maybe we'd have tried to hold the game in for a longer period. But obviously, sort of 60, 70 minutes in, we then brought Souček, we took off players, we brought on more defensive players, and I'm okay with that. Because we need the wins. And lastly, I mean, talking about the crowd, I mean, maintaining home momentum and crowd engagement, I think that's critical in terms of our battle against relegation. First home win since February, a 9-game drought at London Stadium in terms of winning a game. Sustaining this sort of energy through, aggressive starts, visible effort, fan engagement. We can turn this stadium into a fortress without a shadow of a doubt. And having the likes of Freddie Potts there gives you that sort of fan engagement, sort of feel like there's a fan on the pitch as well in terms of Freddie, because we know there is, and the Potts dynasty. And you could see him, and I'm saying now, future West Ham captain in Freddie Potts. Definitely, if he can maintain that level of performance, and it would be an obvious choice to make Freddie Potts captain one day, maybe in a couple of years' time potentially. But that's it. That is the breakdown. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Any sort of data points you want us to cover for next games, the Burnley game and stuff, let us know in the comments below. But until next time, my friends, take care, stay safe, stay warm, stay humble. Give it a hype. Monday is hype day. All your hypes are back. Give it a hype. Much love. Bye-bye.